Hey everyone, this is Sean Paulseth coming from Wedge TV, giving you another Wedge exclusive roundtable. So thank you for tuning in. Today we are focused on a very special topic and a very relevant topic in the hiring and HR world: diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. We have a tremendous amount of leaders here to speak on this with different perspectives in different areas. We have Naiba King, the global head of inclusion and belonging at the Body Shop and International Retail. So fabulous perspective there. We have Rocky Howard, the chief people and equity officer at the Mum Project. Hey, Rocky, how are you?
Good morning.
And
Happy to start the day with this fabulous panel.
thank you. And we have a surprise guest, which I'm super excited about, Jackie Clayton. So, VP of Talent Acquisition at Textio. They are doing a tremendous amount in the HR tech space, and we get a perspective from not only Jackie, but Textio, as well as a talent leader. So, super excited to have everyone on here and dive in. And I hope everyone learns a little bit because I'm excited to learn myself. So, thank you for joining. Jackie, I believe you have 30 minutes. Is that
Yes.
accurate? Okay. I think we're waiting for one other, Naiba King, but we can get started. Maybe just a quick intro of yourself and maybe your title and your company. That would be tremendous.
Sure, I'll jump in. Like you mentioned, my name is Jackie Clayton. I'm with Textio. I'm the VP of Talent Acquisition and Diversity and Inclusion for Textio, and we create products that help organizations communicate more inclusively. That's the
Awesome.
very short version. I've been practicing.
Yeah, well, I'll jump in. So first of all, let me just tell you all in the audience, 30 minutes from Jackie Clayton is like worth a million minutes from anyone else. What a surprise this morning. Hey sis, how you doing?
Hey.
Hey. My name is Rocky Howard. I'm the Chief People and Equity Officer at the Mom Project. If you are not familiar with the Mom Project, we create economic opportunity for moms who are looking to return back to work by connecting them with jobs, connecting them with data and insights, and companies with data and insights through our Work Lab division, and upskilling women and moms, particularly of color, through our Rise Scholarship program. So I'm so excited to be here today. And I identify as she, her, Black, Christian, Gen X, wife, and mom.
Thank you, Rocky. And I was going to say, I know Jackie does a fabulous morning coffee ritual, which I'm hoping I get invited to maybe after, but we'll see. Don't know. I had a couple areas that I wanted to kind of dive in. Obviously, diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging is a huge topic, and there's multiple different things that we can cover. But just as to kick it off, what does really DEIB mean to you, and how has it evolved? I know there's tremendous amount of buzz in it in the industry, but I know you both come from different kind of areas. What does that mean to you, and kind of how has it evolved over the past years? Maybe Rocky, if you want to kick that off.
Yeah. It's an interesting and a really huge question, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think when I think of DEIB in its most simple terms, right? It is about, and this isn't always enough for people, unfortunately, but it is about looking at the multiple dimensions of diversity and the intersections of the dimensions of diversity, and making space for those voices to be heard and felt and appreciated and respected, and giving equal place at the table, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it sounds really simple. For me, it's about the right thing to do. It's the right thing to do for individuals. It's the right thing to do for our companies, but it's so much more complex than that, with all of the historical information and biases that we have in our head that makes it complex to just do the right thing. And so I think the way it has evolved over time is that we're in a place where people are no longer willing to go, I'll be patient and I'll wait for you all to figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
We are no longer in a place where we can have these moments and then they just sink back and we forget that it happened and we go back to our old ways. I think the way it's evolved is that you see more people attempting to get involved and really understand how not to do something in a performative way. Although, if I'm truthful, there's still a lot of the performative stuff going on. But I do see steps towards people trying to understand from a company perspective, from an individual perspective, how do I take steps forward? So I could kind of talk on this for hours, and I'm talking with who I consider to be my partner in crime. So Jack, like, why don't you take the stage? What do you think?
Yes. Well, when I jumped in, I was really started doing this particular work at a conference for recruiting when I understood that the goal of inclusion was not going to include me. And I was hurt by that, you know? Like, I thought, I would like to meet these people. I would like to participate. They're looking for me. I'm standing right here and they can't see me. And then upon greater research, recognize that that is set up by design. It wasn't meant for me. And started thinking about how many others are we ignoring? Are we forgetting? And so my background really has come from a technology standpoint and software standpoint, that not only was it not meant for me, that meant products weren't meant for me. Maybe a car wasn't meant for me. Maybe this particular software and tools that I was using every day was not built for me. Much like somebody who is left-handed, the world is not meant, it was not built for left-handed people, and they have to make different accommodations for that. And I realized people had to make those accommodations. But if we could get those pieces in, wouldn't it be great if we had a place that was made for everyone and kept those people in mind? And so taking that to our places of work, it is creating an environment where these people feel safe to come in and share their thoughts, so we can build a better product, so we can reach more people, so we can change the world that way, recognizing that if we do it the way we've always done it, we are leaving people out of the equation.
100%. And I think we have our last panelist joining right now. So Naikiba King, she is in the waiting room. Super excited to have her join us. Hey, how are you?
Hey, I'm doing amazing. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, and thank you for joining. We were just kind of getting everyone's 2 cents on kind of DEIB and what it means to them and how it's evolved. Now, I know you've done a tremendous amount when it comes to open hiring, and I think this goes to your point, Jackie, as well, in terms of even what Textio is doing as well. Now, unfortunately, open hiring is something that I think has come out because of the current labor challenges, and we kind of didn't really look at it beforehand, which we probably should have. But I think open hiring is an interesting concept because I think it does impact things like marginalized groups and opening up, and even things like about gender bias and job descriptions and everything like that. So, Naikiba, maybe, and am I pronouncing your name correctly? I want to make sure I don't sound okay. I wanted to see your 2 cents on kind of open hiring. I know you did a remarkable job outlining this on the podcast with Recruiting Future, but maybe you want to kick it off on open hiring, how that's impacted DEIB today, and kind of the current labor challenges that we're seeing.
Yes, for sure. So I am from the Body Shop, where I lead inclusion and belonging for the Body Shop globally. And we started open hiring actually in 2019. So the initiative, the open hiring initiative, was not actually in response to the current situation or the current labor market, but it is one of those strategies that is responsive and can really respond to any challenge in the labor market. So I just wanted to mention that we didn't start it for that reason, but it has definitely had positive impact. And when we say open hiring, you know, we have inclusive hiring as sort of an umbrella where we're thinking about how we make positions more accessible to people in general who maybe have been excluded from the workforce and have greater barriers to employment into entry. However, open hiring, you know, when we talk about that, what we mean is that we've removed all sort of unnecessary prerequisites to employment. So originally, before we started open hiring for these entry-level roles, it wasn't truly entry-level. You needed to have certain experiences or skills, or at least those were valued or prioritized in the hiring process. We did drug screens, background checks, and all of these sort of things, and an extensive sort of interview for people that were coming in to do these roles. And now we've removed all of that. So there's no sort of pre-employment requirements. We don't have the drug screens, the background checks. And actually the interview process is just 3 questions. So we removed the formal interview and we just ask people, are you legal to work in the market? You know, can you work for up to 8 hours? Can you lift X number of pounds, depending on what the role is? So it's literally the basic entry for what you would need to do to be successful. And we'll teach you everything else. So it is truly based on potential. And the first person that applies, if they answer yes to those questions, that's who we hire. So it does not allow us to sort of screen out based on our own biases. And it's been excellent. We always have candidates, and that is the result of us not sort of removing people or putting obstacles up for people before they even have the opportunity to show their skills and their value to the organization.
Very interesting. I know as a recruiter, when I was growing up, I did a lot of recruitment. And if I looked at someone and they were from a specific university that maybe I attended,
Yes.
I would prioritize them. And I didn't realize it at a time, but that's a horrible bias. That could be maybe that university only adheres to a specific population, or lets in certain types of people. So that would then kind of accelerate through there. So there's little things like that that I didn't realize I was doing until much later on. And I'm glad we're kind of shining the light on a couple of those things too. Now, Jackie or Rocky, anything on the kind of the open hiring concept and how that's kind of evolving over the years too?
I would say we, especially at Textio, look at some of the things that have gone into place as far as the systems that have been put in place before us to make these hiring places more exclusive. So we're trying to make it more inclusive, with the understanding when you're a startup and you're backed by VC funds and you have a minimum amount, you have to be considerate of who you're bringing into the organization and set parameters around there so that you don't turn into what we saw a lot of what the happenings were in 2020, where people were making mass hiring, making sure that it was open when the economic of the situation changed. A lot of those people were the same people that were the first let off, and we weren't helping. So I think it's really depends on your organization, the types of things that you have. But I do think that there are things that we need to look at. Like, is it something that doesn't make sense? Like, are we requiring someone to have a degree that's not aligned with their job? That doesn't make any sense. Or are we requiring somebody to do these background checks and drug checks, and maybe they have an offense from years ago that is not going to affect our organization in a negative way? We don't know the full story. So I think those things are really important to look at.
Yeah. I think, like both Nakiba and Jackie have said, for years there have been barriers to entry that disproportionately impact, people who have been historically excluded. And we need to look at that and move it out of the way. Right. And so I really appreciate, I think, Nakiba, what you all are doing is incredible. Right. And it increases the diversity, the multiple dimensions of diversity that you see in the pipeline. I think a lot of times what happens is that companies who have more corporate backgrounds go, oh, well, that's good for retail, but we can't do that over here. And you absolutely can. Like Nakiba, back in 2018, I worked for an organization where we did the same thing. And we went, do you really need a degree for that? Do you really need 2 or 3 years? Why do I need a coordinator to have a degree and 2 or 3 years of experience? Heck, my 16-year-old knows more, about computers than I do. Like, it's a different world, and we have to keep up and adjust with that. But the one thing that I want to add to this is what I think is one of our biggest challenges in getting this done if you don't architect it from the talent acquisition side, you've got middle managers who are the people who are conducting these interviews. And if we don't work with those middle managers who are the biggest one, I have this new theory. Jackie knows me. She knows I'm always coming up with a theory, right? So this is my latest theory, right? Is that middle managers are one of our biggest barriers to actually being able to get integration and amplification across our efforts. Because what I find in a lot of organizations at the top, they're truly very committed to, yes, we want diversity to happen, and it's authentic and it's genuine. And then you have grassroots initiatives that are coming up from the I hate to say bottom of our organization, but you've got grassroots initiatives that are coming up, right? And so you've got this support that's coming down, and you've got initiatives that are coming up, and where does it meet? It meets in the middle. And our middle managers, there's a statistic out there that show 44% of managers say they don't have time for this diversity stuff. Like they just don't have time for it. And because we are putting a tremendous amount of pressure on middle managers to deliver something, right? I need you to make sure A, B, C is done. And that's how we're assessing their success. But we're not saying, I need you to do it in this way. I need you to understand the benefits that diversity can have to help you successfully get your job done. We're not empowering them. We're not holding them accountable. And so then it's so much easier for them to default on those old ways. I've got a position open. My frat brother over here, I know he could do it. And you know what? I just need to get the position filled, and I need to get the work done. So that's who I'm going to hire, right? And they're smart enough to know, oh, you know what? Yeah, like I know this interview guide. I know what I need to check to be able to get it done. So like my personal opinion is that it takes those of us who are courageous enough to say, yes, let's remove some of these systemic things. But I think that there's a ton of work that has to be done at that middle manager layer to really get this integrated.
Very interesting. And I did, in terms of getting diversity on the forefront in that, on the corporate side of things, when people hear about an economic downturn or the recession, things like diversity, equity, inclusion sometimes now take a back seat because they're just trying to fill people in seats. And it seems that when there seems to be maybe a global problem, or even like a COVID or anything like that, diversity initiatives sometimes then and this is what I've heard and through some research, tend to be put on that backseat. How can we still focus on diversity and shine a light on how important that is in those times, and as companies continue to grow and adapt to some of those things that we're seeing potentially in the future as well?
Well, I think a lot of that has to do with impact. Most of these initiatives are relatively new for organizations, and they're recognizing that there's a cost involved if you're going to put in any of these programs. It's going to require that you make an investment. I think that a lot of people were put into these roles without a clear architecture, people who are making it up as they go along, which can be difficult. Then you have other people who've been doing it for years who recognize the investment, and these things take time. This is not like implementing a new software program or a new process. This is a whole different understanding. And the challenge that Rocky was talking about middle management, I will call it and reduce it down to saying Gen Xers, of which me and Rocky are both a part of. There was the people before us. If you look at boomers before us that were paid with loyalty, and then you look at people who are generations after us, pay a loyalty tax where they're not getting those opportunities and being boosted up. And so it's a real unlearning of a generation that has to happen within organizations and outside to make sure that we're fostering these relationships. And so what happens is you have to show what's going to happen if we take these things away, that we know that generations under us are looking for these things. It's a minimum expectation. It's not a, oh, yay, look what they do over here. That's a minimum expectation. If you take these things away, among all of these options, people will leave. Now, there are going to be people who don't leave. And what the question becomes, how are you nurturing these people? And you have to show them the results of what we're seeing. How are we getting more people? How is this aligning with our mission? How are we getting closer there rather than just it's the right thing to do. I don't think people do things because it's the right thing to do. You know, I didn't exercise this morning. That would have been the right thing to do. I didn't feel like it. You look at companies, they know that diversity and inclusion, but it hurts. It's too long. It takes too much. And so I think it's important to not let people at the top take their eye off the ball, as this initiative is going to help us reach those goals faster, more equitable, and then that translates into the public to help people want to work with us, to get those people when they know we're taking the time and making the investments. And so I think sometimes you just have to be loud with your successes or challenges along the way to get more people involved. And part of the reason that people look at these like, oh, we're not going to do that anymore because we need to save money, a lot of times is because we didn't do the initial investment when we had the time and attention in the first place. So I look, you know, we already know people are not doing it. You have to get people involved to have a stake in it in advance of these types of things that can happen, to recognize the importance, which is the hard work, right? I mean, that's the hard part.
I think it's also, I completely agree with everything that's already been said. I have a slightly divergent opinion when it comes to people doing things because it's the right thing to do. Because I think that often people do want to do the right thing, and but there are gaps in their blind spots. There are gaps in visibility, understanding, and lots of competing priorities. So I think part of it too is about working to establish a culture. And I think Jackie said this to some degree, where we're really listening to voices, and I'm talking about voices that typically wouldn't be considered the voices at the top. So you have to really work on people's thoughts in order to shift their behaviors, which translate into long-term action. So an example would be like at the Body Shop, we recently established a youth collective. And it's interesting because these are Gen Zers, right? And millennials and people that are not typically in the boardroom. And the point of it is because now they are in the boardroom, and it's their commitments there about recommendations and listening to what they're saying and then taking action on the back of their recommendations and the way that they live and show up and interact and respond to the world. And when you start to do that, because they are looking for organizations that are more inclusive, and they are living in ways that are more inclusive, and they value and prioritize it, then what that means is that it comes to the top of your value chain in a way that it may not have shown up with leaders that are not necessarily from that generation. And it's not just with inclusion, it's with lots of things, but I think it's about really centering, your culture has to center the voices of diverse people. And when your culture does that, when you have diversity in the door and it's truly an inclusive environment, and you center the voices of people who are, you know, living inclusive values, then that also will shift your culture's priorities. And you know, we are naturally people that want to connect. So people having a space to tell their stories and to share and to co-create the environment, especially getting into those generations that are really inclusive inherently, or have become because of, you know, the difference in when they're growing up, basically. That's also important in really shifting your business priorities.
It's such a powerful statement about engaging people, right?
Yeah.
And I think the other side of it is your willingness to, I want to go back to the original question, which is how do we keep these initiatives in tough economic times? And I think this is when like the truth comes out, like were you really committed to it in the first place? Like, let's call it what it is, right? Like, did you sign on to this because it was the movement of the moment? And now because people aren't watching, you're going to be willing to go, oh yeah, that's okay, nobody's watching, we'll just eliminate that role, we'll eliminate that initiative. If you're truly committed, those organizations, like we said, that are from the, you know, top down and the bottom up, that are truly committed, it's never going to occur to them that this is what you eliminate, that you take the ball off of diversity, equity, inclusion. And I can speak very openly, you know, unfortunately, the Mom Project just went through a layoff, but I tell you what is intact, and actually what is part of our go forward strategy for keeping our employees engaged and committed is DEIB is at the top of that list. And that's what happens when you understand this is not about performative. This is something that we're really trying to continue this journey, and we're not willing to sacrifice that is thing number one.
Right.
Nikiba, I want to go back to what you talked about. So powerful. You have a youth council. We just put together a talent and culture council. We opened up that talent and culture council for anyone that wanted to join, but it wasn't just you want to join, you can join. There was an interview process. There was a reason why. And then when we looked at those members, we made sure that there was representation across multiple dimensions of diversity. So from age to race to gender to, orientation, how you identify, what your tenure in the organization had been, what your level of the organization you're in. We wanted a balance of all of those voices. And I tell you what, it is hard. Let me just tell you, for those of you who are listening, this isn't easy, right? No. It's not easy work, because they're going to say things to you that you do not want to hear. They're going to say things to you that challenge the way you've always thought about things. But we use that council in many ways, but one of them is a focus group. So when we want to do something different, we're going to change a policy. We're going to make a statement on something. We say to this group, hey, look, we want to run this by you. What are your thoughts? Where are the challenges? What do you see? Where are the gaps? Where isn't it inclusive? And if you ask, they will tell you. They will only tell you if they believe that you're listening and will take their feedback into consideration. We all know as business people, we can't do everything that people ask us to do, but there should be a genuine willingness to go, oh, those young people are in the boardroom and they have said this, and we really need to listen to that. And how can we incorporate their feedback into how we're moving forward?
So true. So true. I mean, we have I think most organizations at this point have this, our version, but we have our employee networks and their inclusion networks, right? So they're dedicated places where you have people with lived experience, allies, but we're truly listening to their recommendations. And then we have our inclusion council where all of that intersectionality that you're mentioning, Rocky, comes through. And this is what I mean by centering the voices of people and being really inclusive in who has who you're listening to and how you're thinking, because then that shapes the direction of where of where the organization is going moving forward.
For sure. I think being able to feel comfortable with disclosing how they feel and what's going on and where they're from and how that impacts their day to day, I think it's that kind of step one. And the step two is creating those kind of committees where you can actually make something out of that, and you can hear those voices and then create policies and everything like that. So that's all great. Now, I know, Jackie, you are leaving relatively soon, and I did want to have a quick question regarding technology. There's a tremendous amount of technology out there in the HR tech space. There's a lot of noise. I wanted to get your kind of 2 cents on, specific to Textio as well, about what you're most excited about in terms of technology that's actually impacting DEIB. I know there's a lot of companies that boast AI was a big thing there. Now it's DEIB and things like that. Textio is actually out there doing things in this regard. I'm super excited to let Jackie kind of let them know, or let our speakers here and people that are listening know what Textio is doing and how they're actually impacting DEIB today in the hiring world.
Sure. So this has been a journey for over 7 years. So this was well before people were like, it started with why should we care and why are you doing this? And that's not economically safe to care about inclusion. To looking at first, our core product where we started was really looking at job descriptions and recognizing that the language that people were using were turning some people away from, the actual ad. People were walking, self-opting out. But we have a lot of PhDs in natural learning space and looking at language as it evolves on what will be attractive to people to make sure that we're not turning anyone away. We want to make sure that our job posts are inclusive and give opportunity across gender lines and across race lines and different types of abilities, membering of the centering people and not just centering white men, which has been looking at job descriptions historically or coming down. And so it was being more attractive to white men than people that weren't white men. Moving forward, we're looking at, and we recently had a report, we started looking at the performance management space. And so we started looking at what is the language in the performance management space, because it's great that you have initiatives to attract people, but you may have forgotten, how are you keeping these people here? So we're started looking at, now that you have these diverse populations, how are they being treated internally? And I don't think that there will be a surprise. Well, maybe for some people, but internally it was looking at Black women, even if they were high performers, were still spoken to as if they were low performers. They were using words like always, hyperbolic descriptions about personalities rather than the work that was actually being done. And so it really got to the point where we were looking at it to say, listen, like, this is a starting point. Looking at your job descriptions and inclusive language is a starting point, but you have to be able to sustain that. So let's make sure that you are being fair and equitable so everyone can thrive within the organization with real actionable feedback so that people can grow to be better and get rid of some of these secrets or barriers to success and growth within organizations. And so that's where we're going, and I'm really, really excited about it. It's triggering. I hope people will look at the report. It is triggering, but it's necessary because you can't change what you don't measure. And if you're not looking at the reality is, you know, Rocky knows I'm always having all these reports that I call, I'm not saying, I'm just saying, like, I'm not saying you hate women. I'm just saying you haven't promoted any women. Take that for what it is.
The data says all. The data says all.
Damns the facts, right?
I don't
like
get mad
that.
at me. The data's right there. So
That's awesome.
I appreciate you having me and letting me share. I'm going to go hop over and have some coffee, but it's been fun hanging out with you all, and I hope to see you again soon.
Love you,
Thanks,
Jack.
Thank you for the work you do.
Love you.
Thank you so much.
Awesome. Yeah, no, I would love to kind of get your 2 cents, both Rocky and Nakiba, in regards to what technology out there. I know Textio is doing big things. I think to her point, a lot of companies just don't know their data on what's going on in each funnel, on each stage of the hiring process, who they're hiring, what's going on in each facet of the business. And the bigger it gets, the more complex it gets. And I guess deeply rooted the problems become. But yeah, Rocky, what's your kind of outlook in terms of technology that you're excited about, not that can actually impact this?
I'd actually like to answer this from a different perspective, if you don't mind, Sean.
No
I think the challenge with data is we look at our organization and we haven't done the work to say, what does successful DEIB mean in my organization? So instead, what I do is I go, oh, Nakiba is doing awesome things over, at her org. And because she measures these things, I'm going to go measure them. Right. And they may not be relevant to what I'm trying to accomplish. They may not be the right things for us to measure as an organization. And then we have all of this data that actually doesn't tell the right story, right? And then we get confused because it's not relevant for what we need. So I that's why I wanted to answer this question from a different perspective. I think as you get into data, you need to start with a foundation of, what does DEIB mean in my organization? What does success look like? Where are the gaps? And then I think that should drive what data you need to be able to measure, right? I also think that we need to stop looking at data. For a very long time. Look, I'm married to a numbers guy, right? And what my husband has taught me is you can make the data look like just about anything you
manipulate it.
Like. You can manipulate the story. And so I think the other thing about data is, can we let the data stand? And can we absorb it? And can we be truthful about where we are so that we can get to where we're going? So it goes back to what Jack said before she left. Like, the data isn't a judgment on who you are as a person. And I think that's what happens. We see this data and we get really scared and we're like, oh my gosh, this says I'm not doing my job. Or, it said that, I hired 10 white men under 40, so I must be a racist. Like, that's not what the data is telling you. We need to really be willing to go, this is the story. And how does that story either align or not align with what success looks like with my organization? And what actions do I need to take to move it forward, right? So that's the way I kind of look at data is I don't need 1,800 data points. Here's what I'm trying to accomplish in our organization. This is where the gaps are. This is where I need to measure it. And I need to use it to hold everyone accountable. I'd really be interested to hear what you think about kind of the tech and the data.
Yeah, I'm aligned. And, I think the first year that I was in my role, we didn't focus on data. We focused on to your point, what are we trying to accomplish? What are our goals? And then after we understood where we were trying to go and what our goals were and what we were trying to accomplish, then we looked for tech solutions that could help us measure impact, that could help us benchmark and then measure along the journey that we are trying to take. So I think from a data perspective, there's so many things. The tech has to be, the experience through the tech has to be clearly the user experience and the interface and all of that has to be great. And so does the trust that in the D&I space in particular, the trust that tech solution sort of establishes with the population is really important because clearly the disclosure rates and all of that stuff also matter a lot when you're thinking about what that data is actually telling you. So there's both the data and then there's the common sense check. And those things basically have to work together and be aligned for you to then make the right decisions as you're thinking about these solutions. But I think about tech outside of just data, right? Because we've brought in tech solutions for a lot of different reasons. And I think if you just think about COVID, I mean, we're a global organization, but I would say we never worked more as a global organization as we've done in COVID. And that's because we had to, a lot of us were at home and different things. So we had to. And so the tech solutions that you sort of had to do that were really critical to your organization being able to withstand some of the pressures of how the workplace changed. And it's the same with D&I. So tech solutions allow us to be often more agile, to be more inclusive because we can reach greater populations, and geography and stuff like that doesn't matter as much. Time zones, you can get across some of the things that can really be sticking points or obstacles to being truly inclusive. So it's critical to D&I, especially in some of those areas where accessibility or, diversity, like even things like neurodiversity or geographical, I've already mentioned, but all of the language, like there's so many things that tech can unlock that you would struggle to do manually.
Yeah, no, 100%. I actually there was a commercial from Mod Pizza that I'd seen recently, and they were kind of shining the light on the culture. And I know, Kiva, you touched on this a little bit about videos and telling people the story and the culture from the employee perspective, as opposed to someone who's the CEO and it's a polished marketing video, that kind of thing.
Right.
And the Mod Pizza had thing where they actually zoomed in on one of the employees and they had an ankle bracelet, like a house arrest ankle bracelet, but they were still making the pizza in the exact same way. And it got me thinking about kind of inclusive hiring, open hiring, and telling that story through video.
Yes.
Now, there's a tremendous amount of tech out there in terms of video content and how that can actually shine the light on what's going on with their culture, but more of a raw, authentic video of an employee day to day. Hey, you know what? They gave a chance on me and I've been here for 5 years. This is why now I'm a manager and things like that. So I wanted to kind of get your 2 cents on where video content can shine a light on culture and progress things like DEIB and open hiring and initiatives like that on the front end, to really tell the story of the employees on the front end to potential candidates that are thinking about roles in those areas.
I mean, if you think about it, and it's relevant to any generation, but if you think about the fastest growing sort of social platform, which is TikTok, and why it's the fastest growing platform,
Yeah.
And why people are drawn to it. It's connection and it's authenticity.
Mm-hmm.
Literally anyone can start a following and become viral, but the people that do are often the one. It's like your mom in the kitchen, or it's just regular people, not necessarily big corp. And often it's the authenticity, and it's people being able to look across and see someone with lived experience like me, and a day in the life almost, or a day in whatever it is that they're sharing in the platform. And I think it's the same, with the question that you're asking. So when you can get into the real lived storytelling, the authentic experience of the employees that are on the front line, the majority of our organization, that's who it is. It's not the CEO, or it's not me, it's the people that are actually, I don't like to use the term, but on the ground and face to face with our consumer base, and working in our shops every day. So I think, to your point, when you can connect in that way, and you can talk about what the real experience is like and show all of the exciting things about the experience, then that humanizes the job. It humanizes it for the candidate. It also allows you to see things about a person. So a resume might go, we're looking at a pile of resumes, and a resume that has non-traditional work experience comparatively to resumes that have experiences that, you mentioned affinity bias earlier. So somebody that came from a certain university, or maybe they came from a certain retailer. So that resume sort of goes to the top of pile. But when you're talking and connecting with people outside of that, then what happens is things come through that are transferable skills that relate to what we're doing, that may have just been pushed aside if you were just looking at that, CV or resume. So there are lots of ways that this connecting through video and telling a story through video can be really empowering and impactful on both sides. I'm really interested to hear what you think, Rocky, as well.
Nikiba, honey, I don't know I can say anything better than what you just said, right? Like, it's all of that. And you so nailed it. I think what I was thinking when you were talking about this, right, is and Sean, you talked about a commercial. Like, I think about how Dove changed the game, right?
Yes.
So if you think about Dove's commercials, Dove, early 2000s, completely changed what their models look like and how they showed up, right? And it gives me chills because it wasn't even just about color, right? It was body image, beauty bias, all of that. Like, Dove just changed the game, not because of a moment, not because of a movement. They started this years ago, right? And the reason that I'm bringing this up is because it has the power. Like, we can never underestimate the power of a story and the power of an image. And so when Dove started to do this, there's a couple of things that happened. Before that happened, when was the last time somebody thought about going out and buying some Dove soap? Dove was a dated brand. Nobody was trying to buy Dove soap. That was something that our grandmothers used with it. Nobody was buying it, right? But it changed how you looked at the brand, because you saw someone that looked like yourself, or you saw someone that looked like your best friend. You saw someone that looked like your brother or your mother, and you thought, I need to look at that differently, right? When I think about Dove, I think about that as an analogy for everything that Nikiba said. It not only changes how our candidates look at us, but it changes the very way we look at ourselves. So, like, what I was thinking when you were talking about that is, so if there's a story and a narrative that's told through video, it's not only my candidates that are looking at that, it is my managers, my leaders. It's the people who are the culture keepers who are saying, I've bought into this story, and now I want to align with that story because it speaks to me. And I think that's the power of video. So everything that Nikiba said, because I couldn't say it any better, but maybe just to bring that to life in a way that makes you feel that. I very much grew up. Jackie said, I'm a Gen Xer. When I was a child, I couldn't look for enough. There were no images that looked like me. Right? no images that look like me. And one of the things that I am so heartened by is, to Nakiba's point, not only is it on social and it's coming grassroots where anyone can say, here's how I show up, but you've now started to see how that's influenced mainstream media. And guess what? Now my children can turn on a TV and see images that look like us, and the multiple dimensions of us. That's not just about me being Black, right? It's the multiple dimensions of us.
Absolutely. If you look at some of the advertisements that were around even 20 years ago, you start to begin, you're like, oh my goodness, that is completely offside. How would we even, and you're blinded to it. Like, I wouldn't even have realized that at the time. But I think having more awareness is so key in that. So the last question I wanted to ask is really, what questions aren't being asked when it comes to DIB? What isn't being covered that isn't kind of in that now mainstream people are chatting about, like you and I right now? Are there things that are just necessarily kind of completely covered and people are scared to talk about? Or they're specific? Rocky, you're like, there's a long list, Sean. That's a whole different, we're going to need several hours. But I'm sure there are that I'm not even aware of. But I want to get your kind of your 2 cents on things that that we need to shine a light on that aren't today.
Here, why don't I speak from a very personal point of view of what keeps me up at night?
Okay.
We live in a cancel culture right now, right? And I absolutely am a believer in using social to challenge paradigms that should change. Right. What keeps me up at night is I can't do this by myself. And what I mean is, I want to change the perception of what it means to be a Black Christian over 50 wife and mom. I need to be in conversation with white, straight, cisgendered men who aren't parents. And I need to be able to hold open conversations and challenging conversations without us canceling each other. And I am really concerned that we live in a cancel culture that has made people who are majority so afraid that they're going to say the wrong thing, do the wrong thing, that it is silencing the real conversations and progress that need to be made. I think that's what we're not talking about. I think I want to hear voices equally amplified, and I want to see conversations equally amplified, because I personally believe we change the world one story, one conversation, one action at a time. But if I'm too afraid to ask you a question about your story because I'm afraid I'm not going to say the right words, or I'm not going to ask the right questions, or I might offend you, then how do we have the conversations with each other that actually move towards understanding and action? That's what's keeping me up at night when I do this work today. Nakiba, what's your play on this?
That has kept me up at night many times because I think people have to bring, in order for the work, I mentioned this earlier, in order for things to really shift, there has to be like a sustained change, and it has to come from sort of the thought level in order to shift the behavior long term. Because that's why, that's where you get like short-term commitments to things that are not lasting. And that really does come through the human to human connection and the ability for people to have the real conversations, the real, and the courage to do it, but also the safety, because there's a level of safety that's not there when you are in this cancel culture sort of environment. And we very much are operating in that. And that can limit how far we can go, because then people work on the surface, which is not sustainable. And so it does, it is definitely something that has kept me up. And I think the other thing that keeps me up is before earlier in the conversation, we were sort of talking about this and some of the work that Textio is doing, which is incredible. And that's about, it's not just opening the doors. So I'm in all these conversations about how do we open the doors and what do we do? And how do we get, it's not just opening the doors. It is, like with open hiring, we're tackling unemployment, but then you have underemployment if people are just sitting in sort of the entry levels or are at the start, they're in the door, but then that's it. And we lose momentum as we think about how people are then continuing to progress and grow. And I think, it's a natural extension of any one of these conversations, but it's about, how do we sustain that meaningful commitment beyond the start of the conversation? How do we sustain it beyond the first steps that we've taken and continue, to challenge ourselves and think beyond sort of the initial commitments that we make in any one of these initiatives? And that's the thing that, I think we need to equally prioritize and think about.
Absolutely. I think opening the door is one thing, but then giving them equal opportunity to move up is a whole other internal mobility understanding. And that goes back to understanding your different areas of the business and who's moving up and who isn't. And I feel like there's a lot of people that don't really know what's going on in their front end of their business of hiring and things like that.
No, very true.
And very powerful, Rocky. Thank you for sharing that. I'm with you on that. I remember when everything was going on with the Black Lives Matter movement, and I have friends that are like, I didn't really understand. I didn't really know what was going on, but I did want to have that conversation, but I was kind of hesitant. And I do think there are people out there still that are afraid to have tough conversations or ask, hey, how are you feeling? Because I've never felt that way before as a middle-aged white male kind of thing. So I think there definitely is a barrier there. But that's super powerful. So thank you, Rocky. All right. And that was my last question, but I really appreciate it, Rocky and Nakiba. It was nice meeting you. Thank you for all of this. We really appreciate it from here in Wedge. And I know our listeners and watchers will definitely take away a bunch of valuable information. So thank you again. I hope you two have a wonderful day.
Thank you. Nakiba, you're incredible. I'm so glad to have shared this space with you. Sean, appreciate you.
Agreed. Thank you.